It's the Last Stand Podcast. And here's your host, Brian Custer.
That's right. It is the Last Stand, the unfiltered, straight talk from some of the biggest names in sports. And our guest today, well, he played 12 years in the NBA, two-time All-Star. He is known as a Knicks legend. I love him because he is a great brother of Kappa Alpha Psi. He's my brother. He's none other than Allan Houston. Bruh, welcome to the Last Stand.
Brother, glad to be here, man. Glad to be here.
Well, listen, when we promoted having you on, I'll ask you the first question people sent to us on social media. What has Allan Houston been up to these days?
Well, it depends on how long you want to consider these days. You know, when I stopped playing, I kind of officially retired in 2005. I took a 2-year stint where I was really doing some ambassador work with the league and the NBA. And then in the organization, Donnie Walsh, who was the president at the time, shout out to Donnie, great man, asked me to join. And, you know, he said, you know, I think you have potential in leadership in this game and the organization. You know, Jim Dolan, shout out to him too, because he's always been not just, you know, someone who's on the team, but he's kind of been a mentor. So for me, they've allowed me to just, you know, I have 7 children, as you know. So for me, it was always like, I always wanted to have a balance. And I think it's important, especially as a professional in anything you do, as a man who's a father, you know, a husband, and you're taking care of your family, you got to have a balance. So for me, it was always about how can I contribute to the game, to the Knicks, and can still make sure I'm taking care of things, you know, around my family and the community. And so leadership has always been something I've wanted to explore. But, you know, when you're in this world, right, of professional sports, especially when you're tied to a team, there's so many ways that looks. It's in management, is it scouting, is it coaching? And so we've been able to develop kind of a path where I'm able to share leadership principles with our players, glean from our staff, and still just offer wisdom and advice. And we have this new leadership development initiative that we've developed with the Knicks that I'm just grateful for. Leon Rose, Scott Perry, Worldwide William Wesley. And, you know, Tibbs was an assistant coach when I was playing, when we went to the finals. So at the end of the day, you know, as a performer, as an athlete, and anything, it's really about impact. Like how are you impacting the success of the situation you're in? And that has to be intentional. It can't just be, man, I played bad last night, or I had a bad day at work, right? It's really about how can I look forward and think about principles I want to just bring to the table and try to live by them. So that's what I get passionate about, you know what I mean? And I remember we were out in Vegas and we were talking about some of these things, watching, you know, players who are kind of in transition, you know, and it still comes back to, you don't want to look back and say, man, I wish I would have done this. And that's really where, so the question is, I'm always exploring these things, these concepts, and sharing ideas, learning from players, learning from coaches. And then what I try to do is bring all that to, you know, learn from how I can implement this into my home and how can I implement it into the community. So it is kind of like it's a perpetual way of learning and coaching and leading.
That's hot. You mentioned the Knicks, and let's be honest, this team has really been hovering around 500 for most of the season. Tibbs, as you talked about, was an assistant when you were playing under the Knicks. In your honest assessment, are the Knicks on the comeback?
Well, absolutely. I mean, you know, again, I'm always careful with, you know, analysis and words, but, you know, when I look at comeback, somebody else might look at comeback and say, well, are the Knicks, you know, a constant playoff team or a contender? That remains to be seen over the next few years. But I will say that the standard of operation, the standard of performance, the standard of just how we think and view and the culture is definitely on the comeback, right? And that's really where you have to start, right? Everybody has to buy in to this one aspiration, this one goal. Um, you know, when contracts are shorter in this league, and in most leagues, right, it makes it tougher for people to say, I'm all in, I'm bought in. But what you realize, you understand, is that what makes New York unique, and I've always believed this and said this, there's room for everybody, right? There's room for everybody to shine, to win, not just from a financial standpoint, from just, I've been on teams, like every team that's won in New York, whether they won it or they had winning, right? You had multiple high impact players and personalities and stars and stories, and they were all able to fit together, and nobody ended up caring about anything but winning. And that's really where I see a kind of comeback, if that makes sense.
And do you see the Knicks becoming a destination again? Kind of like what Brooklyn has done, where Durant and Kyrie have kind of like now all of a sudden lured different stars there. Do you see the Knicks getting back to those days and doing that here in the next season or two?
Everybody wants to play with really good players, and you want to be in a really good situation and environment. So the days of saying the city is recruiting you, that's not really the case, right? It's not about just the city. It's about the culture. It's about who's going to give me a chance to win. And obviously financially, you want to be able to take care of people, right? And owners always been done that, right? So I believe so. I mean, I can't speak for players who are looking from. I'm having inside view, right? So I'm partial. I know that I know when people have played here, when they leave, they say, man, they always say, man, I miss it, and they say, man, you guys really take care of people. But you got to see that for yourself, right? It's like marriage, right? Being a father, like you see it for yourself when you're in it, right? And you appreciate it when you're in it. So that's what I can say.
Mm. Let's talk about you, because in your career, you were considered one of those type of guys that had the prettiest jump shot ever. At what age were you where you knew you had a gift and knew that you could really shoot it?
That's a good question. Well, when I was younger, I was really thin. I knew that I had good mechanics. My father, he didn't really have to go out and say, hey, put your elbow in, do this and this and that. For me, some of it came natural, but I had to learn. What helped me is I had to learn to kind of create my own shot. Like I wasn't a guy who just sat there and said, hey. So I had to learn how to get my shot off the dribble, move around, because I was skinny, so I had to get space. So what that helped me do, and then I was skinny, so I didn't get to shoot the ball up over my head until probably my freshman year in high school. So when you hear guys like Steph and Clay and a lot of these guys, Trae Young, who, shoot the ball, Damian Lillard, when they shoot the ball from, like a certain position, it helps your mechanics. So that's just to say, I didn't really see myself as an elite shooter. I don't know, maybe my sophomore year in high school, I started to realize that I felt very confident. Like when the ball left my hand, I felt confident, but I worked at it. Like I was always in camps. I was always in camps all summer. Probably, it was probably when I got to college when I was like, okay, when you see yourself at another level and you're able to kind of do that on the next level. In my freshman year, I averaged 20 points, and I averaged 20 points all 4 years. I started to see where my strength and advantage was. And now it's a matter of how can I build everything around that to enhance and amplify what I can do with shooting.
And it's not easy, kids, even when they're younger, playing for their fathers, fathers training them this and that. But, you did it. I mean, you go to the University of Tennessee, you play for your father, Wade. What was those days like for you?
Well, first of all, like my dad was the assistant coach. First of all, he was the first at the class of the first African-American scholarship basketball players at the University of Louisville in 1962. There were three players, and he was one of those three. Then he became the first Black assistant coach at the University of Louisville. Went to four Final Fours as an assistant coach. They won 2 national championships at Louisville. Then he gets a job at Tennessee my senior year. So all through my life, I planned on playing for him at Louisville. Then he gets a job at Tennessee, and then I was like, whoa, and I already signed with Louisville. So for me, my first thought was like, I'm going into a new situation. He was the first Black coach in SEC history in '89. So I'm going in with this mindset of, okay, even though I was kind of a highly recruited, highly touted basketball player in Louisville, I'm coming to a new situation, new conference, and all this is new. My biggest responsibility was not for me. It was like, we got to make this, I have to make this look good, make this work for our family, right? So I just had an extra motivation for that because I knew he was the first Black coach. He was going to be looked at in a certain way. We were going to be looked at in a certain way. So I had a lot of motivation and fuel. Our personalities made it work, right? That's one thing I would say about people coaching their kids, right? It's not easy. I think it made it easier when we were in college than it would have been when I was younger, because now you realize it's not just me and him. Like there's a lot of other stuff that's going on around here. And so, I had teammates that I had to kind of set an example for, and I'm 20 years old, so I'm gonna be doing dumb stuff right on campus. So I'm like balancing all this stuff out. And so I think it was really this idea that there's a much bigger picture. There's a name that we're carrying that it was established at early in our relationship. Like we had a very, close relationship. And so it carried forward. So that started everything. I think I had a mutual respect because I'm seeing him coach players that played in the NBA, and they were telling me, man, you gotta like make this work for you, for your family, for your dad. So I knew that, but hearing it reinforced by other players and pros that mentored me, that he coached, like it was a lot of dynamics that just gave us the fuel, but really the values. It was the values that we learned early that really were the centerpiece of it. Faith, like we talked about, the thing that we're doing now, faith, integrity, sacrifice, leadership, and legacy. Like we live by those 5 values and we talked about them a lot. So that's really what held it all together.
And it sounds like that was a lot of pressure, man. I would think that was a lot of pressure for a young man to know that, hey, look, this is my father's first opportunity. I gotta go, but if I'm going, I gotta make this work because I gotta make him look good too.
Well, the thing that helped that was that, he never, I don't remember him talking a lot about like, all right, now, when you get to league, this, when you get to the NBA, this, right? Everything that he talked that came out of his mouth. Now I knew after my sophomore year that could be a reality, but it really wasn't even until then that I really like focused and locked in on it. Everything we talked about was about character and education, right? He sat me out of practice one time for a couple of weeks almost because I was struggling in a class. He sat me out of the first 30 minutes of practice. And like, those were the type of things that set the tone. Like, man, this ain't about playing the NBA. I've seen that. I've been there. I put them there. You're my son. What you're going to be about is education and character. Now, so for me, I knew I had a talent level. I knew where I played against the top guys. I played against pros and in the summers, and like we played on that dream team. We played in that college select team against. So I knew that I had the talent to do it. It was really now about what's the foundations that's going to allow you to sustain it if and when you get there. And that's what he focused on, right? And I think that's really where, as a father now, at talking to coaches all over the country, talking to young athletes, like that's really what I focus on. And a lot of coaches say they want to focus on that, but they don't. They don't with the intensity and the intentionality that they need to.
It's interesting. What do you think, Allan? What do you think about the style of play in the NBA today?
It's like it's fun to watch when it's working well, but it's immature in nature, right? It's fun to watch because you see the ball moving, you see it clicking, and bam, guess what? He's wide open. Shoot it. Why are we wasting time, doing all this stuff? When we were playing, you sought out the mismatch. You came down, okay, he's going to him, throw the ball to him, and let's work off of that, right? You still have to do that, especially now in the playoffs, because it's about matchups. It's why the best, players in a playoff series are going to basically win, right? But how you get to that is the game within the game, right? Now the game is about pace. It's about shooting threes if you can. That's the part I don't like as much, because while it's a statistic may say if you're shooting 35% from the two and you're shooting 36% from the three, why not just back up and shoot a three? Because the value of that shot is more. I'm like, to think that way, you're missing out on the nuances and the psychology of the game, right? I just saw in his eyes that he didn't want me to go right there and shoot, right? There's a psychology to scoring and to manipulating a game in your opponent. And so we missed that, I think, right? And we don't teach it. And then we expect people to know how to do it.
That's interesting, man. And it's interesting that you say that, because your game, I mean, would fit perfectly. It seems like with this type of NBA. At any time, do you ever say to yourself, and don't get me wrong, listen, you made a lot of money and you had a great career. Do you ever say, man, if I played in today's NBA, my game, all of the accolades, they would have been even greater if I played in today's NBA?
The reason I don't say that, B, is because when I came out of Detroit, I signed an 8-year deal, right? It was the first of those long, and then I signed a max deal. So, yeah, I mean, for the time I was in, I was just like, I was blessed. But today's game, the reason I kind of go back and forth with that is because I've seen and I know that there are a lot of guards who play my position similar to where I played, and they're like, man, I'm not really getting to do what I know I can do. I run to a corner, I come off of a dribble handoff, and I have to throw the ball and wait to shoot a three. Like, it's not my game. And I think I would have been the same way, in that, like, my game was, I want to punish you in the mid-range and get to certain spots. That gave me a rhythm. Like, I could come off a shooting a three. I could come off a pin down and shoot a three, come up and dribble up and transition, shoot a three. We weren't shooting the ball from 4 feet behind the three, but I probably would have tried that if I was in today's game. But it was really about, to me, I have a philosophy about scoring. Like, if you can score anywhere on the court within 2 to 3 seconds and limited dribbles, then you can be guarded. In today's game, you're told to stay away from certain areas of the floor to score. And that's the only thing that I'm not sure. I don't know how I can answer that question, because I may not have known that if I was in today's game.
1993, man. You were the 11th overall pick in that draft by the Detroit Pistons. And that was really towards the very end of that Bad Boys era, all of that type of stuff. What were those early years in Detroit like for you?
Yeah. Well, so you're right. I'm coming in, Lindsey Hunter, shout out to Lindsey Hunter, Mississippi Valley State head coach, HBCU. We were really good friends before the draft. Like, we became close like right before the draft. Got drafted 10th and 11th. And they told us, like, hey guys, we really want to groom you behind Joe and Isaiah. So we were like, yo, like, this is, I'm excited. We spent our rookie year, we spent the whole summer like training with Joe and Isaiah. Barely went home. And it was one of the most valuable things that I've ever done, because it set a tone for like me seeing how these Hall of Famers do it. They're all close to retirement, but they're still in there every day, doing it differently than they would have done it, when they were 22, but they're still doing it. They're, like, it's a craft. It's a professional thing that you just do. And it was tough because you could see that they were used to certain ways that weren't there anymore. So you could see a little bit of frustration with them. But you also get to see, like, this is probably not how this is supposed to be, in terms of just, we won 20 games my rookie year. Right? And then my third year, we make the playoffs. Right? So you figure out where you are. You learn, you ask questions, you watch, you stay patient, keep believing in yourself, and just keep chopping the wood. And Joe was a great mentor. And Grant Hill came in, my second year. I mean, Grant was like something nobody ever seen before. 6'8", doing stuff like played any position. And so we're like, oh, okay. So that really, when he came, it kind of really lifted us, our spirits and our hopes to what we could do. Now we had Lindsey Hunter, we had Theo Ratliff, we had and Joe was still there. So it was an interesting time. And then, so my third year comes, and I was a free agent, and I did not expect what happened to happen. I was expecting to stay in Detroit. I met my wife there. It would become home. But free agency, reveals a lot, and so in New York, opened that door up, and that checkbook up.
Right. That Brinks truck rolled in.
So I went from, man, I'm just trying to establish myself in this league, to, wait a minute, I have a chance to actually win in New York. Like, that was the money was obviously a factor, but I think a lot of some things that drove me too was people were like, he ain't gonna do that. He wouldn't do that. Like, he wouldn't take that challenge. And I'm like, that actually fueled me a little bit too. Because that's one thing about me, is like, you don't ever back down from a challenge. You just put the work in, and you see what happens. Like, God has the rest, and so that was my mentality.
And what was since we're talking the early days of the NBA, what was your welcome to the NBA moment?
What really wasn't like, hey man, when Sean Kemp dunked on me, it was really more like, we had like two guards. Like, I feel like the era of the two guard was golden. And when maybe before I came in, because you had guys like Ricky Pierce, Doug West, Mitch Richmond, Reggie Miller. Like, every game there was like a killer at that position, like with the mouth watering, because that was just that era. you know? So it was really like going against those guys my rookie year. Like, I'm coming out of Tennessee playing 4 years, so I felt my body was, was right for college. I was, shooting over people I could handle. I was a big guard, that had some athleticism. You come into the league and it's like, wait a minute, this dude is like my height, jumps higher, grown man strength, like, whoa, so it was really a series of those encounters, when you're like, man, okay, this is different. This is like, and I played 4 years, you know what I mean? So that's where you gotta really understand that, especially when you're coming in younger, these guys are coming in younger, like you gotta be careful about not expecting so much so soon. It was 7 years in before, like my first year in New York, I was in my, I was 7 years removed from high school.
Wow.
You know
Wow.
what I mean? And I think that that's really where, I know I drifted a little bit, but it was really like those moments that really that just showed you where you are.
And you mentioned this, but I think people really forget how athletic, and especially when he first came in, how electrifying Grant Hill was. I think everyone just thinks, oh, man, yeah, that's the guy who had the knee injuries, the ankle, and yeah,
Yeah, man. I
Grant
mean,
Hill. Can you tell us?
he dunk on anybody, dunk on Zoe. Like it was really, um, that you knew that you were seeing something like like Grant had this aura, really smart guy, came from great family. So he had, that piece. And so a lot of people are like, man, like, is he really that? Like, is he that guy? Like, you watch him play a few times, you'd be like, okay, yeah, he's that guy, you know. Um, and the only thing early on that he had to figure out was, his range on his shooting, right? But he figured that out because he gets you backing up. And, you know, so and you think about, like, even after the injuries, how he was still able to have impact, even when he was in Phoenix, right? And later on. And it's like, so yeah, man, like, he's one of those stories. He still inspires me because not just because of the type of guy he is and a friend, but just the way he went about everything. People, you know, well, I like to talk to our guys about this, and Derrick Rose is another example. When I would talk to him about, like, the respect that he gets just because of the adversity that he's overcome. It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen.
Mhm.
Something's gonna happen in your career where it kind of like punches you in the gut, and you gotta, like, take that, knee, get back up, and say, all right, now I know a little bit more about myself. And it's not about kind of what happens, it's about how I handle it.
Mhm. Good point. And you talked about how when your rookie deal was over, basically with Detroit, you decide to sign with the Knicks. Obviously, the money was great, but
Mm.
was there any other team out there that you were contemplating, like, maybe I'll sign with these guys as opposed to New York or Detroit?
Well, Indiana was also in the picture, but I wasn't really thinking of going to Indiana. My thing was like, I really was planning on staying. I mean, and what I thought would happen was, so Reggie Miller and Steve Smith were also free agents. So everybody thought that Reggie was going to come to New York. Steve might have been in the picture, but everybody thought that, and I was figuring, okay, well, if Reggie goes to New York, uh, then maybe I could use that for leverage and tell the Pistons I might go to Indiana and try to just, get a little bit more out of this. But when New York kind of made me understand, and I felt it was authentic. Like, no, you're young. We see you having a longer upside. We see you as kind of helping us remain in this hunt to win a championship. And we need scoring. We like your side. Like, all these things made sense. And I believe that I was a piece to this aspiration to win. And when I felt like, and I think that's really what happens, I think, in a lot of times in free agency, it's like picking a college. Like, do you really fit? Like, do you really see a fit? And like, do you see yourself just really working out? And I honestly saw, like, I knew in Detroit what it was gonna be like if I stayed. Okay, I know that. But this is like, wow, like, I could see it. It wasn't like, okay, well, they just kind of want me here. Like, it was clear that, no, we like Reggie, like, and all this, but I'm sure they would have, like, I'm sure that if something would have happened different, they would have signed, Reggie and those guys in a heartbeat. But like, I just felt like it was real, that I was a young person at this position, that they felt like, how we really want this to work.
Well, listen, you come to New York, and obviously, I mean, this team was a really good team. You end up taking John Stark's place in the starting lineup, and then basically a year after that, they make that trade and go get Latrell Sprewell. And that was somewhat controversial, considering he was coming off the PJ Carlesimo, the choking incident, and was labeled like the bad boy of the NFL, voted one of the most hated people in the NFL, but yet NBA, I should say, but yet you guys got along so well. And it seemed like your games complemented each other. Why?
Man, that's a great point. We'd played against each other in college. We had some battles. And so we had a high mutual respect for each other. We played against each other and battled against each other when he was in Golden State. And I think that, once you have a person like that on your team, where you have as much respect for them as they may have for you, it starts there. And you say, okay, this is not about a battle here. This is about, and that's what I meant when I said, like, when you in New York, that's a perfect example. We had Marcus Camby was a #1 pick. We had Spree. I mean, we had Patrick. We had LJ. Like, you think about, if you really want to win, you got to have talent, right? And not just one, So there was room, and so what we came to understand is, we're gonna make this thing work, because it's very rare that they're gonna have someone that can guard both of us. They might have a guy that can, kind of neutralize, like, good. You're not gonna be able to guard both of us. So once we kind of understood and just played off of that and figured it out, it was kind of an adjustment. But I think we just had a respect for each other, because we both were competitors. Like, we would be in practice, kind of going at it like we were like brothers, and people were like, wait a minute, should we stop this? Or what's but like, that's what fueled us. Like, we knew that if we were going to do that in the practice, then the game, it was just fun, man. It was just fun playing with somebody, like that, who you just knew was just a dog, And the one thing that Ernie, the GM, told me and told us is, like, you look up in the Raptors, there's two guys that played together that people didn't think they would be able to play together.
Yeah.
And they
and Earl the Pearl.
Yeah. And so for us, there wasn't like any pushback or anything. It was just like, no, we're just gonna figure it out, because this is New York. Like, it's gonna be on us to make this work. Not just on the two of us, but just all of us, And I think Jeff and the staff did a really good job, just keeping our mentality at a high level.
A couple of years later, '99. I mean, you guys get to the playoffs. I think you're the 8th seed. And in the opening round, you take on Miami Heat, your rival. Game 5, you hit that running shot with like 0.8 seconds left. And all I remember is Allan Houston going like that after that shot. Talk to me about what you remember about that shot. And in your opinion, biggest shot of your NBA career?
Probably so. Probably so. Well, we had been in battles with Miami from the moment I got to New York. So, that was kind of like, 1 year is one, let alone 3. That was like the 3rd of season of those battles. So it's like, here we go again, and you just learn in those playoff games and those moments that you just have to make sure that you minimize mistakes, put yourself in the best possible position to be ready. And we had guys like Chris Childs, Charlie Ward, who didn't get a lot of shots and touches, but they made big shots. And so we were all like, when you have that type of run, everybody at some point is going to make a play to help you win, and so yeah, it was just, we execute. When people talk about that, I really don't think about the magnitude of the moment. I just think about, I always talk about execution. You want to get a clean look in those moments. You want to try to get a clean look. And that's really the first thing you think about. And so, yeah, we ran a play. I saw early that they knew the play. So, shout out to Charlie Ward for making that little pocket pass, and the underrated part of that play. And then I didn't really have any other choice. You had Zoe sitting back there. You had Dan Marley, who's like right behind me. And I hadn't really practiced that shot much, but your instincts take over. Got a good bounce, and stories written.
And you guys had so many battles. I mean, what comes to mind when you remember like Van Gundy hanging on to Alonzo Mourning and LJ? I mean, like what comes to mind when you think about some of those battles y'all had? And what did y'all even say when y'all went back to the huddle after something like that?
We knew what we were, like we knew what that was kind of expected. Like, at any point something could happen. I think it was really more of a mental battle than anything, because it's like almost wrestling, right? It's a physical grind, but like one little angle, one little tweak here could be the difference, right? And gaining the advantage. And then it comes down to making shots. Like the 1 year Tim, game 7, had 38 on us. Tim Hardaway just went off. Like, it's what happens. You know what I mean? And so it really does come down a lot to making shots. Anthony Carter hit some big shots, and it's like, it's going to come from somewhere. And I think that's why you have to just prepare, beyond belief, right? And I think both of those teams were known for that, for the preparation. And because it does come down to making plays, making stops, making shots. That's, actually there was one play at the end of the game where I think Tim Hardaway was coming off a pin down and Spree just happened to get his hand on. And I think that was a key play to that game as well, right? Where just like little things like that, keep you in position.
Obviously that basically that same year, you guys get to the finals. You take on San Antonio Spurs. But man, Patrick Ewing's hurt. Larry Johnson gets hurt. In your honest assessment, do you believe if the Knicks were at full strength, do you win that NBA final?
I think we have a really shot. Like, I don't know. I don't ever say, yeah, we definitely would have won this or that, but it was tough, when those big guys, um, Tim was, even though he's a rookie, I mean, he was so mature, you know. Um, I do think that I felt like from a talent perspective, I think we had a little bit more just straight talent, but that their size was overwhelming, during that series. So yeah, I do think that if LJ would have been, healthier, and then with Patrick would have been there, like it definitely would have neutralized a lot. But one of our strengths was getting out and running. So the reason we kind of were able to make that run is we were able to get easier baskets and get out and run. And so it's kind of like, you know, um, hindsight, it's hard to say, but either way, like the size was a huge factor in that series.
Mm. Those Knicks teams that you guys had, calling card was certainly built on defense. Could those teams be successful, you think, in today's NBA?
Yeah. You figure out how to make the adjustment. Yeah, you figure it out. I mean, you got to think O could shoot the ball. LJ could shoot the ball. So it's not like those guys couldn't shoot. It was just the style. And I think, you would figure out, how to play and make it work in today's game. But then you have to have talent. You have to have skill. You have to have toughness. You have to have a capacity to defend to win. You got to defend. I mean, you can talk about pace all you want. I think even the Warriors that year, they were in the top 3 in defense. So you I think if you look at the skill set and the mentality, I absolutely think we could have played.
So many characters, yourself, Spree, Patrick, Oakley. I mean, you can go on and on about the guys that have been. Any practices where you even had to shake your head and say, man, I don't know if we're going to survive, or I think some of these cats may have to go to jail the way we fighting up in here in these practices.
No, it never really got to that point. I think it was because we knew it's like a family member, right? You know that you might have a crazy brother, cousin, whatever, but they're not gonna go so far because it's his family, you know what I mean? And so for us, it was practices were very intense. They were competitive, but it never really got out of control like that because we just knew it was like I keep thinking wrestling or boxing. I mean, when you're sparring, you're gonna take some hits and licks, but it doesn't really get into a real fight because this is just what we're doing. And I think that it always would get physical because that's just the way we play. John, man, made me so much better. Having to compete against him from day one in practice, because he played that way, the same way he was guarding Michael Jordan, Joe Dumars, and that's the way he knew from day one that it wasn't about who's going to start. That's why I got so much respect for him. He was the first one that came in and said, "Man, you're going to be a great Knick." Like, I didn't know what to expect. People kept saying, "Now Knicks need a 2 guard." I'm like, John Starks was an All-Star in '94, right? And but it just says so much about him. Like, he was like, man, he would be the one to tell me, like, dude, you want to be that level, you got to do blah 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 blah, and in practice. So, like, having people like that, you just don't see that. You just do not have, and built like him, like a lot anymore.
Mm. Wow. 2001, as you talk about, you signed this like 6-year, $100 million contract extension. You're the highest paid Knick in franchise history at the time. And it was, to me, it was amazing how quickly afterwards you received so much flack. for the deal. I mean, even people we used to say this is the poster child of bad contracts or bad Mac. How did all of that affect you?
Probably more than I let on. You know what I mean? You always say as a person, like, don't let outside stuff determine. It never affected who I am or was. But I think what really bothers, you the most is that the same person, the same spirit, the same mentality that I had to get to that point, that never changed. Like, it's not like I just said, okay, now I got this money, now I'm just gonna sit out. Like, I think I missed 10 games in 7 seasons at one stretch, right? And so for me, what bothered me the most is, like, there were days when I know beyond a shadow of my doubt that 80% of the people in this league wouldn't have practiced. I know it. I didn't miss practices, right? Because it was my responsibility at that time to practice because of the contract. Like, it wasn't about, I felt like that was my way of saying I wasn't like a top 5 player in this league. But what I had to do for the organization is to do those things, right? Because they trusted me with that I had to be responsible with it. So from the outside, I think what hurts is, and I get it, right? Because you're saying, man, like, okay, what can we expect? It's like, if you pay for something, what can I expect? And people really looked at it like I had to look at it this way later on. People looked like they were paying. They were the ones paying. And I'm in my mind, man, you're not paying. Jim Dolan's paying. Right. You know what I mean? So I get the perspective was how it was skewed. But again, I think what hurts the most is, like, I never wanted to, as a front office person, never to look at a person and view them as a contract. So now you start being viewed not as a player, but as a contract, and but it was eye-opening. It was great learning. And what I drew back on is, like, when my dad left the University of Tennessee, and he had to resign, I look back at, how many people to this day say, man, I so respected your father for the way he handled himself, the class, the dignity with which he handled a lot of it. And that's what I thought about. Like, I'm not going to change anything about who I am. And, to me, that's the way you got to show strength, is be the same person, still be able to go out, serve. And I just believe that's why I was been blessed to still be here, is eventually those same people are like, man, no, you weren't saying that when I was making this kind of money. Right. So I understand that it's the weakness in that person who doesn't have the kind of maturity in themselves. Say, this ain't about like contract. It's about, this dude is like, was he expected to say no? I don't want it.
Right. Yeah.
And so yeah, no, I think it was definitely eye-opening, and I'd be lying if I said it didn't twist in you a certain way. Because, there were times when I couldn't even walk up the steps, when my knees kind of started to go, and it was just like, so those were times where you look and you say, it grows you, as a person.
Well, and I think the sad thing was, because I think it was maybe a couple of years into the deal, like you talked about, you injure your knees and the knee problems, and then all of a sudden, like, the NBA comes up, what was it, the amnesty rule, where you could buy out a player, waive them, and it seemed as if the lingo, they were calling it the Allan Houston rule. And at that time, were you like, okay, enough's enough? I mean, why me?
Yeah, I mean, there are times when I still to this day think I'm going to change the name of that rule, because to me, it so what it represents is like you don't have to put a name to that. You know what I mean? Just make it a rule. uh, but I get it, right? Um, yeah, I mean it's all part of the story, man. It's all part of the uh, the journey. It's part of why I can share experiences with people and they can receive it or not. It's why you would listen to some person and not another one because is it credible? Is it valid? Is it truthful? So I look at it as, you know, when you go through times like this, it gives you an opportunity to when somebody else is going through something, it's like, I've been there, you know. So you learn from it, grow from it.
Mm. Greatest professional accomplishment.
Professional accomplishment. It's hard to categorize it in professional because I always think about like the fact that my wife and I are, going on 25 this year. We got 7 children, and so even though that might be professional, I just want to like clarify. That's probably what I would say.
Basketball wise, how about this from a
basketball
basketball
wise? I want to say, winning a gold medal, but it's a very lowercase small but, right? But
okay.
But I think just being able to play in the NBA Finals in Madison Square Garden is like, man, it's obviously it would have been. I don't even know what I would have been where I would be right now if I had won it, but I don't know, man. Just it's like that experience is like I don't know. I don't know if I can think of anything higher than actually winning it. Playing in the NBA Finals in Madison Square Garden.
Biggest NBA regret?
I don't know. That's a tough one. I don't know if I really have any regrets in terms of, I don't. I mean, could I have studied more film? Maybe. I probably could have looked back and say maybe I could have. I don't know. I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know if I have an answer for that.
Some of your teammates, because you work with the Knicks, certainly had some public run-ins from Oakley tussling with security guards. A year later, Spike Lee on what entrance I should come in, and then in March, your former teammate Patrick Ewing says he's going to this walking onto the court of the semifinals of the Big East tournament, and he says the security was hounding him for his credential. You ever wonder why it seems like sometimes the Garden is like their own worst enemy?
I don't see it as the Garden is his own worst enemy. I definitely see that people have to understand that the Garden is a, I don't know what's the word I'm looking for. It is a place where it's a lightning rod, right? And people love when things are going well in Madison Square Garden, but when things aren't, they love to take notice of when they're not, right? And when they're not, you're going to see that lightning rod, point to those things as well. So I can say that as being part of the Garden family and people who are part of the Garden family, I think that I don't think there's any better place to watch a basketball game, to play in a basketball game. No better experience. If you go around these arenas and watch, I don't think it's close, and I really try to see an objective view just so I can learn. So I'm appreciative of that. But I've been a player when things are going well. You have, because it's so competitive, right? The people are competing for stories, and New York is. I found that New York is like the place that people really say they don't really want to be a part of, but they really would. Everybody would love to be a part of that, right? And I think it just comes with it.
Yeah, good answer. listen, besides your Knick requirements, it seems like your passion has been your foundation. And if you look at it, the acronym, it looks like Fizzle. But faith, integrity, sacrifice, leadership, legacy. Tell us all about it. Tell us the mission.
Well, the mission is just that. If you look at those 5 principles and values, and I think we're, especially now in a world where we have a generation of young people who I think are the most important generation in our history. When you think about when I was 15 to 25 in that area, in that age realm, you're discovering who you are, you're discovering where your place is in the world and life, decisions, your identity. And it was in that stage where I drew back on my relationship with my father and other mentors and people who really guided me, even though I was headed for being a professional. But it's really the framework from which I needed to see myself. So like Fizzle is that. It's a way of thinking, it's a philosophy, it's a way that people can kind of really frame their life and say, okay, this is where I want to go and where I want to be. And it's a platform that we've kind of built so that this generation can kind of be mentored, supported, connected, and live by values, like be led by some spiritual principles that can really keep them motivated, give them access, hear their stories, but also equip them, for the life that they really want to lead. So it's really been kind of confirmed during this last, year and a half, because we're seeing how important mental health is, emotional wellness, disconnection, and spiritual health as well. So we just really take these 5 principles and say, if you want to be something, first of all, how are you defining success? But there has to be a plan, a strategy, a platform, a framework for how you're, living and acting. And you have to have someone who's there to support you during that process. So my father and I started doing these retreats and using these 5 principles as kind of a language and a lens through which to see your relationship. If you're mentoring someone or helping someone as a young person, it's really my strategy for life. And that's kind of how we view it. So we have not only this platform where, we're hearing their stories, having them trained, the digital platform. But we also have an apparel, a merchandising arm. We have an NBA license. We have other licenses. But the way I see it is like, it's like an internal strength and discovery. And the apparel becomes like your outer expression, right? So when you think about a uniform, right, that uniform is expressing who I am, right? Or even when you wear something like what you're wearing right now, we are that, like we're Newts. And I have a Knicks, so it's like we also wanted the apparel because we know that in this world today, especially young people, branding, everybody has a brand, everybody has a voice. So we're saying, how are you going to use that to make an impact, right? So these values are like, don't just use your voice. Don't just do things and aspire to do things. Aspire to do it where you can make an impact. And that's really what the platform is about.
And for those who want to get involved, want to support, tell us what do they have to do?
So Fizzle, again, is FISLL, Fizzle, faith, integrity, sacrifice, leadership, legacy. So you can go to the website. We also have a Team Fizzle app on the app stores, Team Fizzle. And that's where a lot of people are coming in, joining the community, hearing stories, sharing resources. But between the Fizzle.com and the Team Fizzle app, you'll be well equipped and informed to get on the team.
This segment of the show is brought to you by Man Cave Health. It's a public charity that raises awareness nationwide for prostate cancer. Many of you know I battled prostate cancer, and had it not been for me taking a PSA test, the doctor told me I could have been dead within a year. 30,000 men die every year from prostate cancer simply because they didn't know their number. They didn't get an annual check. And also, do you know 1 out of every 4 Black men are diagnosed with prostate cancer? How important is your health to you?
Oh man. Well, it's everything, because health not only comes in physical form, but it comes in spiritual, comes emotional, mental. Like, it's all, health is all in these dimensions. But look, I'll be 50, April 20th. And for me, I look back on my life, especially during this last year and a half of COVID, like, I appreciate my mortality more than ever. With 7 children, I remember praying literally before I retired, 2 things. One, can I have the flexibility and balance in my life, to be present with my children and my family and my wife? And 2, I want to physically be able to be active, right? My son, I got a 9-year-old son. I can't be telling him what to do. I got to show him, right? So for me, and what was important to me is when I had to retire, it was because of literally my physical joints and body, and I couldn't play anymore. So it showed me how important, especially as Black men, like, we don't historically go to the doctor and say, hey, I'm struggling, right? We don't do that. We don't say, man, I don't feel in a certain way, mentally, emotionally. You have to, because for the sake of your family, I just got my first shot. And I did it because, not just for me, but because it's a responsibility. You know what I mean? And so I shout out to what you're doing in that platform. And my father had a battle with prostate, and he's well. Had surgery. I've had to make sure I'm very keen and sensitive to that as well. So, man, listen. I'm looking at legacy. The last letter in Fizzle is legacy. I don't want my legacy to be, well, man, I was too scared to go get checked out, or I didn't do everything I could do to not be there for my family.
I love that, because that was going to lead to my next question. Then, have you gotten a PSA test, and are you active, because your father has had it, to make sure other men in your life make sure that you and your other men get the PSA test as well?
Yeah, you have to, man. Like, I had a high count at one point, and the last time it dropped. So I was grateful for that. And so, like, at this point, like, we just got to think, like, whatever I need to do. Like, if a coach tells you, here's what I need you to do to get minutes to help us win, are you going to do it or not? So whatever we need to do, we just got to do it.
The mission for Man Cave Health is to encourage all men to take just 1 hour out of the year to either get a physical and a PSA test. And with donations from people just like you, you can help other men who maybe don't have the resources to pay for a PSA test or a physical exam. All you've got to do is go to the Man Cave Health website at mancavehealth.org and sign up for their free newsletter. It is a great resource. And please make a donation, because this public charity is trying to make sure that all men can get a physical and a PSA test. And all you've got to do to donate to this public charity is text The Last Stand to 44321. For people who support the podcast, we always let them submit questions. We got a number of them for you. We'll get just to a couple of them. This first question comes from Twitter. It says, Allan, which Knicks teammate would you want on your side in a fight? You got some great options.
Man, it's only one. Well, actually, no, it was more than one. But I Oak. We've seen that. We've seen that. You could have answered that one.
Second one here comes from Facebook. It says, Allan, your greatest Knicks memory.
Game 6 of Eastern Conference Championship. We beat Indiana. Reason that was my greatest memory is because as soon as we won that game, my wife was pregnant with our first child. We knew that we didn't know, because only God knows when she's going to be born, but we had a comfort level and a peace about going to the hospital and inducing. She was ready. I was just hoping she wouldn't be born during that game. But I knew that I was about to have my first child and we're about to go to the NBA Finals. So that Friday night, of June 11th, 1999, probably my most memorable Knick moment.
That's hot. This one from Facebook as well says, Allan, what's your basketball legacy?
Making big plays. I just want to be able to be known for making big plays when they matter the most.
All right, Allan Houston, time for the last segment of this show. We call it The Last Stand. I'm going to ask you a series of questions, brother. Just give me the first thing that comes to your mind. You ready?
Yeah.
Most talented player from that 1993 draft, was it Chris Webber, Penny Hardaway, Nick Van Exel, or Allan Houston?
Penny.
Talent.
If
you had, what's that?
You said talent, right?
Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. If you had to put together the best 90s Knicks squad, starting five.
Oh my goodness.
Who's your point guard?
90s? Man.
The 90s Knicks.
Shoot, that's a tough one. Who's a point guard? I mean, the 90s, you see, I was gonna say like Rod Strickland, Mark Jackson, but they weren't 90s. You might have to help me with the 90s, because the 90s, who was, you had Chris, you had Charlie,
Greg Anthony.
Maybe Derek Harper.
Okay. Who's your shooting guard?
Come on, man. We got to skip the shooting guard. We know what the shooting guard is. we know what the shooting guard is.
Who's playing the wing? Who's your three?
I'm gonna go with Spree.
Who's your power forward
of the 90s? And I mean, might have to go with LJ.
All right. And your center?
Big fella.
There you go. I love it. Best player you played with?
I'd say Grant.
Best player you played against?
Well, there's one that we know that always comes up, and that's MJ. But I'm gonna say, I know people would say Kobe, but I think from a talent perspective, I'm gonna say Tracy McGrady.
Wow. T-Mac, huh?
Yeah, he just, from a talent perspective and just everything that came with it, he was tough.
Now, who do Knick fans, because you have a pulse on this, who do Knick fans love more? Spreewell, Charles Oakley, LJ, or John Starks?
I think John and then Spree.
Okay.
Yeah.
Last but not least, who's got the prettier jumper? Steph Curry or Allan Houston?
I gotta go with Allan on that, man. I just have to. I mean, we didn't talk about accuracy. We talked about pretty, beauty. Yeah. Usually I gotta be a humble guy, but yeah, I got a little more elevation. That's the only thing
I love it. My brother, man, I've been looking forward to this for a long time, and I appreciate you taking so much time and joining us here on The Last Stand.
Thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it. It was great.
Yeah, that's what we do here on The Last Stand. We bring you some of the biggest names in the sport, like Allan Houston. Thanks for watching, folks. We'll see you again next week.